So I was gonna make this epic video about the new Sigma 50mm F1.4 art lens, but didn't really have enough time. So I'm just gonna straight up tell you what I think about this lens, a few of the specs, and also what do I think in comparison with the Sony 50mm F1.2 G Master lens. They're both so good. They're both so good. First of all, Sigma is not sponsoring this video whatsoever. They just sent over the lens for me to play with, and I've been playing with the 50mm for a couple days now, and it's awesome. Like, it's so good. And I didn't want to make a video talking about the lens entirely, but I wanted to make this video focusing on the differences between shooting at f1.2 and shooting at f1.4, and is there really a difference, and is it worth paying an extra $1,000 to shoot at the lowest aperture possible, like the Sony 50mm F1.2, versus shooting with a lens that's half the cost, but at f1.4. But first, let's go and talk some specs about the Sigma 50mm F1.4 art lens. Sorry, it's kind of dark. It's like the end of the day and I have to make this video because it's going out the next morning, and so yeah, sorry. But taking a look at the lens, the design and exterior features are very similar to the 20mm, 24mm, 35mm, and 85mm art lenses. You got a big focus ring, you have an aperture ring that's declickable. There's also an aperture lock switch to make sure that you don't accidentally bump the aperture ring and change the value. You got an AFL multifunction switch to assign whatever camera setting you want. Of course, you got the autofocus manual focus switch, you got a 72mm filter thread, and of course the same gorgeous design that Sigma art lenses are known for. Now, from the briefing, they mentioned that the Sigma lens has a nice balance of weight, size, and performance. And while performance of this lens is spot on, we'll talk about that later, it's still quite a hefty lens. Like, comparing it to the Sony 50mm 1.2 G Master lens, like, the Sony is a little bit heavier. I mean, they're both hefty lenses. The Sony is thicker and shorter, while the Sigma is thinner and taller. So minute differences here and there, but the one thing that kind of matters the most is the difference between shooting at f1.4 and shooting at f1.2. So here are some examples comparing both lenses, shooting at f1.4 with the Sigma lens and shooting at f1.2 with the Sony lens. Obviously, with the Sony lens, you do see more of that blurry background, that smooth bokeh. But in my opinion, the differences between f1.2 and f1.4 are just so small that at first glance, you probably won't be able to tell the difference. And when comparing photos shot with both these lenses at the same aperture at f1.4, they were nearly identical. Now, some differences, and there were quite a few. First, let's talk about lens flaring. With the Sigma lens, the lens flaring was actually really well controlled. I mean, there were some lens spots like in this shot over here, where with the Sony lens, the lens flare seems a bit in your face. I mean, it's kind of a cool effect if you want to go for that kind of thing. And also no significant lens flaring spots like with the Sigma lens. And so I'm not really sure which lens is the clear winner when it comes to handling lens flaring. I guess it just kind of depends on which lens flare you prefer. And as far as sharpness goes, both lenses are incredibly sharp. I mean, take a look at the shot over here. This was shot with the Sigma lens, and this one was shot with the Sony lens. Both very sharp, especially when shooting at the same aperture value. But gotta say, the Sony F1.2 still retains its sharpness, even if you are shooting at f1.2. Like, that's pretty impressive. Now, when it comes to autofocus performance, which should have been the deciding factor between these two lenses, they both were very similar. Like, whatever Sigma did is pretty incredible. They basically created this new autofocusing system called the HLA autofocus. And essentially it's a linear type of focusing that's quiet and consistent and of course fast. That's obviously great for photography, but really great for video work. And because of that new autofocusing system, like, video shot with both these lenses were near identical. I mean, there were some cases where it was hard to focus on small objects or objects that kind of look similar to the background, like in these shots over here. Like, both these lenses really tried to find that light bulb, and it just really couldn't. I mean, sometimes it did, but most times it didn't. But you know, that's the nature of like low aperture lenses. But overall, autofocus performance was very similar between these two. The one big difference though I did notice is focus breathing. Focus breathing is very noticeable. Like, take a look at the shot over here. Like, you could just see that focus breathing very clearly, where with the same composition shot with the Sony 50mm 1.2 lens, you could kind of barely see any focus breathing at all. So even though both these lenses are very similar, focus breathing is probably the biggest difference between these two. Oh, and price. Price is a big one. So to make my point and kind of wrap this entire video together, which lens is right for you? A lens that shoots at f1.4 but costs $849, or a lens that shoots at f1.2 but costs $2,000? I gotta give it to the Sigma 50mm f1.4 art lens. I mean, as you saw, the photos were incredibly sharp. The bokeh was smooth and beautiful. And even though there was heavy focus breathing, the autofocus performance overall was really impressive. And at $849, like this kind of gives you the best bang for your buck if you're looking for a premium 50mm prime lens. Like, don't get me wrong, like I love the 50mm f1.2 and I'm going to keep my 50mm f1.2, but $2,000 just to shoot at f1.2, I don't know if it's worth the money. Although the reduced focus breathing is nice. That's really nice for video work. But if you're totally cool with that, the Sigma is obviously gonna be the better choice. I mean, how can you beat $849? Like, that's a killer deal. So it's just kind of nice to know that there's an option for people out there that are on a budget, but still wanna have premium quality lenses. So huge shout out to Sigma for the price point. Like, the price point is so good. And if you wanna check out the Sigma 50mm f1.4 art lens, then the links will be down below. But that's it. That's the video. Hopefully that helps you make a decision if you're looking for a high quality prime lens. $2,000, $849, $2,000. Like, I love you. I really love you, but you're expensive. You're like a baby. Babies are expensive. I have 3.